good to go. The brake shoe return and hold down springs. This is incidentally brake test 3. Brakes test 3. Indicate whether the sentence or statement is true or false. These are the old, 50-50 deals. The brake shoe return and hold down springs are attached between the shoes and the anchor pin.
True.
Okay, you guys are, well, wait a minute now. Hold down springs. Think about the hold down springs. What are the hold down springs exactly?
They hold the brake shoe down.
Those are the ones you push and turn.
Oh, wait a minute, yeah. Oh, okay. So then that's false.
And the anchor pin would be one at the top. That's the one that you use your, So it's not. This is the ones you push in and turn. It's got a little, key. When removing imperfections from a wheel cylinder bore, do not remove more than 2/1000ths of an inch, which is also 6/100ths of a millimeter, from beyond the original inside diameter.
True.
That's false.
Okay.
You don't want to remove that much. Come on. Now, every time, years ago, back in the 70s, when I started doing all this, we would rebuild the wheel cylinders every time we put brake shoes on. I mean, it's just standard procedure. You'd pop them wheel cylinders apart and run your hone up through there, dry it out real good, look up in there with your flashlight and make sure they weren't all pitted and everything, put it all back together. But if you did it if you were dirty with it, one little grain of sand would cause that wheel cylinder to blow. I mean, if you have one little grain of dirt that happened to get in there, of course it's good to be surgically clean anytime you're doing anything with grease and steel or brakes or whatever, Also, it's really professional too when you're putting your brake shoes on, not to get dirty handprints all over the brake shoes. You ever seen somebody putting brake shoes on, they got dirty handprints all over the lining? It doesn't really hurt anything, it's just not professional. You see what I'm saying? Somebody's walking by. And no matter how, when I used to put brake shoes on, I would start putting them on. Invariably, somebody would go walking by and they'd see me putting the brake shoes on and they'd say, hey, I do that a different way than the way you do it. And I'd say, really? They say, yeah. Well, here, let's see how you do it. And I would fold my arms and let them do my work. And if I liked the way they did it better than my way, I would take their way of doing it. And this thing, this little 3-minute brake shoe swap that I do out here that I'm going to demonstrating, that's where I picked that up, was watching other people, you know what I mean? And one of the things I always tell everybody when I'm teaching automotive is that you may get to the point to where you have a lot of success, that if you start to get a little puffed up, somebody's gonna bring you down, And just because you're good at what you do doesn't give you the license to be a jerk. You know what I mean? You can be a nice guy, and all that kind of stuff. And I used to get called by people. That's that little answer men thing I wrote. I get called by people all over town asking, hey, what about this? And I just tell them what I knew. If it was a customer that was calling that didn't know a lot, and I wouldn't give them information that I thought might get them hurt, Like if somebody wanted to tell me, how do I take the airbag off my steering wheel? I said, well, we better not do that. All right. The leaking wheel cylinder with deep scores should be replaced and not rebuilt. And that's true. You're going to replace one if it's got deep scores in it. Sometimes brake self-adjusters don't work because the driver seldom applies the parking brake. Well, actually, that's true because they do more when you've got the parking brake applied on the dual servo kind than they do any other time. They're supposed to work a little bit when you apply the foot brake, but they work most when you pull the park brake. And I don't hardly ever use the park brake on nothing I got, to tell you the truth. I mean, I just don't, because if it's in park, Now, I will tell you this. Have you ever been on a hill trying to take your transmission out of gear? I'm talking about your automatic transmission and doesn't want to get out of gear, and then all of a sudden you pull it, boom, and it comes loose. When you pull up there on that hill, a lot of times it may be a good idea to lock the parking brake before you put it in park. You see, and that way it's less likely to bind up on you like that. Let's see. When a leak occurs where the master cylinder meets the vacuum booster, fluid seldom leaks into the booster itself. That's false. We had one that one time. George was your forestry instructor, had that Dodge of his, and the brakes were just start locking up on it. And furthermore, he told me he was having to add a lot of brake fluid. And we look under the truck. Whenever you got a brake fluid leak, what do? You look at the wheels. You see if there's a wet wheel somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. If you got a wet wheel somewhere, you're not going to blow a wheel cylinder or whatever. See none. He's having to add a pretty good bit. Well, when push came to shove and that thing was all done, we pulled the booster off of that thing. You just see fluid down in the booster when you pull the master cylinder off. Pull the booster off. We poured almost a quart of brake fluid out of that booster. So he had to have a brake booster, and he also had to have the master cylinder. And once again, I told you, when you hit the brake and it feels good and solid to start with, like it doesn't need bleeding or anything, it's got a good pedal right on the top, and you're sitting at a red light and you feel the pedal going from under your foot, you know, and then that's a master cylinder. That's typically what's wrong with those. And, you know, I've seen that a lot. I mean, it's more common than you think. Somebody say, well, my pedal's not spongy, but, you know, you can actually let go and get another bite, but it goes on down. You know, the fluid's coming past those seals on the master cylinder. When measuring the diameter of a damaged brake drum, Abby, do you know how to measure a brake drum? You do. What? You use that drum caliper, don't you? You can feel the discard diameter cast into, you can find it, cast into the drum. You look at the drum, usually it's cast into the drum, not every time. Whenever you're most desperately wanting to find it, a lot of the times it ain't there. Sometimes you may have to brush the rust away before you can read it. However, if it's in millimeters, and your drum micrometer reads in thousandths of an inch, you guys all know about the conversion calculator that All Data has? Up at the top, click on conversion calculator, distance, length, volume, whatever. You type in what it is, like if it was 222 millimeters, you type it in, it'll tell you how many inches it is. You know, it's pretty cool on that. 40 thousandths of an inch is what? 1 millimeter.
Yeah, millimeter.
Pretty close. 40 thousandths of an inch is 1 millimeter. All right.
So this is true?
Huh? What is it? 2 millimeters? That would be 80 thousandths of an inch. Oh yeah, that's basically right. Yeah, you can put true on that one. Number 7, front wheel drive vehicles have duo servo drum brakes on the rear wheels.
Sure.
That's false. They have leading trailing. You never see duo servo brakes on a back wheels of a car with front wheel drive. Like if you look at that Oldsmobile, it's anchored at the bottom and the top. Those are the leading trailing brakes. The ones that kind of swing on the bottom and they're only anchored at the top, those are the dual servo. Got it? Something else I was going to say a while ago, and I got sidetracked. Of course, I get sidetracked a lot. But one day, you know, I put on lots and lots of brakes. I mean, I had many years in the field, and I was just routinely popping some brake shoes on there one day. And I got the brake shoes put on there and all the springs in place, but I hadn't put the brake drum back on. And I went to lunch, and I come back, and there's a big sign that the shop foreman has stuck on my things that says, these brake shoes are on backwards. And I pulled it off, and sure enough, I had put the short one to the back. You can just make a mistake, you know. I mean, I don't know what in the world I was thinking about. Maybe I had my head in the clouds or something, but I'm glad he done that because we'd had some issues, you know. I mean, he just happened to walk by and notice that they were on there backwards. But, I mean, anybody, like I say, anybody can mess up. I don't care who you are. Barreling is a term used to describe condition of greater wear toward the brake drum's rim. No, that's in the middle. That's in the center of the brake drum. You know, think about a barrel having these, you know, curved. I mean, they're fat in the belly, and the inside of that brake drum would be fat. The rim would be, the top would be skinnier, and the bottom would be skinnier, and in the middle it would be bellied out, you know. And sometimes the way your brake shoes wear will cause that. Okay, now then we got service drum brakes. Stop wheels from turning, but you know, service drum brakes being the ones that you put your foot on to stop the truck, you know, or car. They stop the front wheels from turning because of what?
Pressure?
Actually, friction between the brake shoe and drum. You're actually going farther than the hydraulic pressure on that. The hydraulic pressure causes the brake shoe and the drum to make contact. After braking, hydraulic fluid flows from wheel cylinders to the master cylinder because why? Releasing the brake makes the hydraulic pressure fall. Springs move the shoes away from the drum. That's the right answer, isn't it? The springs are actually pulling the shoes back in, and that causes the fluid to go back into the brake line. When drum brakes are applied, the brake shoe is moved by what?
Hydraulic pressure acting on a piston.
Very good answer. Not complicated, but sometimes there's some things that I have known for so many years that I think everybody knows them. You know, like for instance, the right way to put lug nuts on.
Your star pattern?
No, I'm talking about with the tapered side pointed in toward the wheel.
Yeah.
There's people that I felt like were pretty decent mechanics and figure like they knew all the basics. And I go by and I look and they're putting the lug nuts on backwards with the stud here and the tapered side of the lug nut out.
That's a good idea.
Brilliant. You know, this goes in toward the wheel, not out. You see, you know, and I don't remember a time in my life when I didn't know which way lug nuts went. First time I saw somebody put them on, and then I'm thinking, one of the state cars, bless their heart. I mean, it's not really all that dangerous, you know what I'm saying? They're still going to hold the wheel. It's not like you're going to crash and burn. But I mean, if somebody sees that, you know, it's like you do the face palm. You know, who did this? You know, if it was somebody that was under my purvey and we've rotated the tires and 2 or 3 people working on it, and you know, whenever you say, who was it that put these lug nuts on backwards, you get it's like the kid, not me, not me, not me, you know, this kind of thing. All right, but anyway, sometimes if I seem like I'm going a little too basic with stuff, it's because we got to make sure all the holes are filled in. All right, what could not cause one brake to drag? Which one of these items? We have a damaged backing plate, wheel cylinder piston not returning, drum wobble, or improperly adjusted master cylinder push rod. 3 of those could cause it to drag.
Probably a drum wall.
What do you think?
I'd say it's damaged backing plate.
Now look at the question again, guys. What's the question?
Probably could not cause one brake to drag.
What did you say? One brake?
One brake.
One brake. All right. What's the master cylinder push rod? It is common to all the brakes. If it was misadjusted and it was holding the brakes all the time, that ain't going to just cause one to drag. They're all going to drag.
The backing plate, that's talking about that thing on each individual wheel.
The backing plate is what the shoes ride against.
I was thinking about that little piece of sheet metal.
No, you're thinking about that little cooling. I mean, a little thing. It's like a rock shield that keeps the.
That thing I had to change up.
Yeah.
The one that he had to buy from, you know, to get that, the pin was broke off that backing plate. He had to pull it off the end of the axle and put it back on. He's talking about drum brakes here. We're talking about drum brakes, and this is drum brake stuff. This is drum brake questions all the way through. Okay, so let's see. Oh, incidentally, something else I was telling Willie earlier, and I need to say this while I'm thinking about it. Let's say, and Willie, you've already been here, so just don't say anything. Let's say that I've got my one front brake, and it won't release the disc. I mean, it won't release the rotor. In other words, it's getting hot and it's seizing up because it's trying to, you'll feel it doing. If you walk by sometimes and you'll feel heat radiating off somebody's rotor, it feels like you could cook steaks on that thing because the brakes have been dragging real bad. Okay, so you jack the vehicle up and you go to turn the wheels, and you can't. Let's say the one on the right, you can't turn it. All right, now how are you gonna find out what's wrong? I mean, do you just assume and start throwing parts at it, or you do some troubleshooting first? Huh? Well, we're going to pull the wheel off, obviously, but you still can't turn the rotor, and it's locked up. Let's say you can turn all 3 other wheels, but one rotor is locked up.
Let the fluid off of it.
How?
Bleed it at the tire.
You can do that. That's a good answer. If you let the brake fluid, if you release the pressure, and it is easy to turn now, you know that pressure was being held there by something. Okay, the rubber hose that comes from the rest of the vehicle, those things. You never notice how I'm always harping on how you don't let your brake caliper hang on that rubber hose, because you can tear that thing a little bit on the inside. Next thing you know, it closes up on the inside and you can't tell it. And somebody will be mashing the brake, and the one that's not torn on the inside and is let pass the fluid real good, the car will start to pull that way, and then the pressure will bleed through the restriction in that bad hose, and it'll eventually go stopping straight. So it starts to pull, and then it straightens up the more you brake. And that's like a hose will do that. The master cylinder can do it too, you see. But if you loosen the bleeder and it doesn't release, what does that mean? Got to have a caliper, okay? Or you got to get a caliper kit and rebuild that when you can do that too, And that's something we're learning how to do this semester. Who in here has took a caliper apart and put it back together? Who has not? You did it, Abby. You should raise your hand. You're supposed to do this when I ask you whatever like that. But I mean, she did it because she did it right after Daniel did it. All right, so let's see, huh?
12 is B.
Well, yeah, 12 is D because your master cylinder push rod is not going to make just one brake drag.
No.
What could not cause a driver? Which could not require? Now, these not questions are irritating because you got 3 right answers and 1 wrong one. But guys, if you take an ASC test, you're going to see some of these. they're gonna say all of these is right except, which one of these would not cause or something like that. So be ready for this. And they love the technician A and B stuff. They just love it. The ASE people do. Which cannot require a driver to exert unusual force to brake. In other words, which one of these would not require you to have to push harder on the brake pedal? That's number 13. What about loose rivets on the brake shoes? That's not going to make you have to put unusual force. The welding instructor we had over here for a long time was Jackie Woods. He was a big old muscled up black guy. And as a matter of fact, he won that Tough Man contest where you get $10,000 if you beat everybody else. He won that thing. But anyway, his brake booster was bad on his little pickup truck. And he got used to using that big muscled up leg of his to stop that thing without power brakes. And so finally we put a brake booster on it after 2 years he'd been driving it like that. And I says, now Jackie, you won't have to mash the brakes as hard now to stop. And he took off around there the first time he stopped. He slid the wheels because he's used to mashing the brake. He had to drive it a day or so before he could remember not to apply, 800 foot-pounds of torque on the brake pedal. Okay, let me go to the next question here. Which one of the following steps is done first when rebuilding a wheel cylinder? Somebody tell me.
Now, I'm stuck between A and D.
Isn't that something? Number 4.
Yeah.
Okay, so what are you going to do first when you're rebuilding a wheel cylinder? Now, you took a wheel cylinder apart, right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we're going to look at push the pistons and cups and springs out. I think that's kind of dumb. That's supposed to be the right answer according to the answer key. But actually, what I would say, if I was taking this and it was an ASE question, I would say of these 4, which one of them is clean and dry the bore, and that's obviously deeper into the process. And the other one is inspect the bore for wear and scoring. That one is too. This would be D. You should remove the boots. Obviously, you can't push the pistons, cups, and springs out if you hadn't pulled the boots off, right? The boot's the little thing you pull back to see if it's leaking fluid, and you got to pull that off of there first. So I don't know why in the Sam Hill they put C as the right answer on the answer key. I'm going to have to talk to them about that. All right.
So you want to put D?
Yeah, put D. D is the right answer on that one. Which of the following steps is done last when rebuilding a wheel cylinder? What do you think? Yeah, while you're in the rebuilding process, lubricating the parts. That's right before you put them back together. Those are silly questions. Which of the following steps is done first when installing brake shoes? Ooh, you guys have all done that, haven't you? I attach one of the brake shoes to the backing plate. This is attach brake shoes to the backing plate is the correct answer. Finally, number 17, which of the following would not usually cause brakes to grab? What in the world is a threaded drum?
Is that where it's warmed?
No, a threaded drum is where somebody machined the doggone thing, and you know how you can change the speed of that thing? If you get it going too fast, instead of cutting that drum smooth, it will cut threads in it. I mean, you won't know what the thread pitch is, but you know what that's going to do. I mean, that's going to cause the shoes to, click, 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 and move around in there, and all that. So basically, you're going to be looking at B for that. That wouldn't cause them to grab. It's going to cause noise. I'll tell you something about grabbing brakes, and this is really strange, and we're just about done with this. We're going to go to lunch here in a second. But, huh?
Was the last one B or D?
That's going to be boy, B for boy. When I worked at a Mazda dealership in 1983, I had a GLC that came in there, and it was nearly brand new. And this lady would, and there's a couple of things I'm going to tell you about a couple of these GLCs. She hits the brake, and as soon as you touch the brake in the morning, just barely touched it, it would slide the rear wheels. And after you warmed it up a little bit, it wouldn't do that anymore. And this was what I was supposed to fix. And so I could make it do it. I could get out there with it cool. I could hit the brakes, and as soon as you just begin to apply the brakes a little bit, the rear wheels would slide. And so I took the brake drums off. There was nothing wrong with the hydraulics on it because I looked at all that. Took the brake shoes off, and the brake shoes looked brand new, but they had some sort of, you could feel them with your fingers. They were a little bit tacky, like some of the resin had leaked through them or something. So I took some brake parts cleaner and washed them off really good and sanded them a little bit. Took care of that problem. Well, there was another lady that had parked her GLC, and she'd run it through some water. Apparently, she parked it, and there was water trapped between the brake rotors and the brake shoes in the rotor. And she got out of the car and left it sit there for 2 or 3 weeks and went to the airport. I don't know. I mean, she was somewhere out of the car. She parked it with that water. And so when you drove it, you were feeling, you know, it was really bad. It didn't feel like a regular, you know, brake pulsation. It was a strange thing. So I jack it up and pull the wheels off, and you could see a rusty mark, the same shape as the pad on the rotor. So I said, well, you know, I bet I could probably fix that. And so I took my drill and I put a socket on there that would fit the CV axle, you know, made sure it was in neutral and all. And I spun that thing up with my drill while I was holding a piece of 80 grit sandpaper up against it. And I did that on both sides. And the service manager come walking up and says, "What in the heck are you doing?" I said, "I'm trying to save this lady some money." I mean, I said, she don't have to have $120 worth of brakes and rotors. All we got to do is sand this off. Her brake pads are good. "Well, you sure ain't making this no money." You know, and all that. So anyway, when I got through, that thing stopped just perfect. And she was really pleasantly surprised because the bill was only $20. And it stopped good. And when I was talking to the field service engineer about that, he said she'll come back to have other work done because she didn't get the screws put to her this time. Well, this lady goes over to the Cadillac store over there and with traction control light coming on, and they tell her she needs a fuel pump that's going to be $1,100, and they got to do that before they can do anything else. You know, what would you do if that was your Cadillac? Wait a minute, I'm talking traction control. Why do you want to put a fuel pump in there and charge me $1,100? So when she called them and told them not to do it, she said, "I'm not spending $1,100 on a fuel pump because I don't think I need that. I mean, the thing runs just fine." "Oh, it's dangerous. It's liable to catch fire and blow up whenever." Well, you know, what can I say? But with a fuel pump is making the pressure high. You know, I mean, if it's got one of those fuel pumps that is driven by a module, you know, I can see how it could be internally shorted and might cause that, but still, you know, that fuel system can't handle maximum fuel pressure. It's weak anyway, you know. Anyway, that's the end of that story. Now you guys can go to lunch.
Ford told me they put a recall on the F-150.